Well, here's my nominations for a top 10 of Tavistock music artists that changed the world. And this doesn't include any artists from the 50s and before. This is artists from the modern coloured world, you might say, the transistor radio world and the world of popular music being reproduced and recorded and just shipped everywhere in the world in mass, like we saw in the 1960s. And there were several real major acts that really carried the main flag of Tavistock, as it were, and the mind game that was put on the public. And this is a top 10, but it's not particularly in any order because each of these that I've nominated are just as important as the other, except for possibly the Beatles. We'd have to give one nod ahead there because they are sort of like the birthplace of it all. But certainly the bands around them, like the Kinks and the Rolling Stones, are going to really be something that we should really look at as exactly like part of an invasion. They called it the Mersey invasion, the British invasion, and this pumped around the world and has continued to do, as you see that song You Really Got Me, has been, an immense thing. And now we have the Lola song really coming into play in recent times. Boys will be girls and girls will be boys in the mixed up, shook up world. Anyway, so I'm going through the artists other than those three obvious ones there for Tavistock. You've got to look to New York as well. And in New York, of course, you had Carole King. Carole King, the female sort of that played the piano, and her mate James Taylor, so-called Man. Well, those two were very, very influential people. I mean, Carole King had a guy called Goffin that she was originally with, and he and her penned a lot of the songs, and there was a real movement in there, which links to Andy Warhol, Carol Bayer Sager, a million other artists, Paul Simon and Garfunkel, two that could be on this list really as well. So I just nominated Carole King because I think she had a huge influence on all female artists past her. She sort of set the bar. And there was another artist of very big importance, of course, Melanie. But Carole King, with that album Tapestry, was just the all-time big thing for a number of years. And her involvement with James Taylor, who likewise really set the bar on what it was to play a guitar acoustic style for men. And I want you to notice how many of these people, especially the leader of the band, will often be doing the beehive symbol that you can see here, which of course stands for the number 28. You'll see that quite a little bit. Now, after the Beatles, the Stones and the Kinks and their influence, there was no bigger influence, and again, after Carole King era there, James Taylor and Neil Young and that sort of thing going on. The big thing that changed was in the period like 74, 5, was the disco craze. And the biggest thing in that, of course, were the Bee Gees and Michael Jackson. And those two, I've wound them together here because they have a lot to do with each other. And they certainly were the next big phase there. That after the 60s, the next big thing that came in, other than American LA sound, which I'll cover in a minute, was the disco, Motown, and white men can be funky too with the Bee Gees. John Travolta, Saturday Night Fever into Grease. You saw it all happen there, and it turned into musicals and everything, and very theatrical. And Diana Ross and Supremes were revived, etc. Again with the Bee Gees, Chain Reaction. It was the big meme at the time, and all these platform shoes and disco duck. There it was in your face, and no bigger than Michael Jackson and the Bee Gees. And then they represent dozens of other artists that are attached to that genre. And it was a new genre, and all the old rock bands like Led Zeppelin and that, were battling against this new music. Now, another one that's very important, of course, that sort of actually came out in that disco time and held the banner for for Led Zeppelin, and Deep Purple were AC/DC, and their music, of course, took a new level on Zeppelin in a way. It was a bit more street friendly and just downright dirty deeds done dirt cheap. Not so Valhalla and Gods of Law. It was now in your face and punkier. And it was certainly the movement that ended up being punk rock. These guys were sort of seen as punk rock before there was punk rock. And punk rock didn't do them any harm at all. I heard an interview where they said every change or shift in music, they seem to be still fashionable. Of course, they got big wheels working behind them. This is the young brothers and their older brothers with Grapefruit and the Easy Beats. Also big parts of a Tavistock style story out of Australia. And of course, AC/DC would have been nothing without Led Zeppelin. Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath and Deep Purple really are all represented here by Led Zeppelin, Led Zeppelin being the biggest of them. Record sales and concert tickets around the world. And you see the Hive, you see the Masonic symbols straight away. I mean, well known. Everybody knows how he bought Crowley's house, etc. It was just thrown out there. This is the band that sort of brought the occult out. They say the Beatles really did, and this was the sprog from the Beatles. And they say the Sabbath was a sprog from the Rolling Stones. And I tend to agree with that assumption. They seem to foster them. And the other one they fostered a fair bit with Pink Floyd. Now, another thing that also appeared in that disco era as an alternative to disco, but it had a little bit of disco about it because you could play it at discos anyway, and it sort of fitted with all the others, was reggae. Reggae seemed to sneak around anywhere. Heavy metal people liked reggae. Everybody liked reggae. Reggae was the music you all listened to when you went to a party, as it were, at certain times. And as I said, could be played in nightclubs along with disco, and it just seemed to fit many genres, and it was different, so different. And of course, all that in the end led to hip hop and rap, and none bigger in that one than Tupac Shakur. I call him the king of rap, but there's plenty others, the Funky Cole Medina guy, and all those different artists of the late 80s, 90s, and into the noughties that were rapping it out, and Cop Killers, Run DMC, you know the ones, Eminem, countless. Again, whitey guys doing black music, and that started coming. It was just a repeat of the 1950s and 60s in that fashion, really. The same old, and the same old mysteries of people disappearing, and we can see trans men stuff very heavy in hip-hop. So Lola really came through in hip-hop more than any other, but I'm thinking country music is just as bad. Here's a funny band, the Super Eagles. The Super Eagles. I just put this up for a laugh because I was searching the Eagles and this turned up. But it's got all the markings, the black and white thing, and it's from Gambia. So early Boule Society stuff, Viva Super Eagles. And of course, yes, again, another mid-70s thing, another alternative to disco where rock went was the LA sound. And it already well established in the earlier part of the 70s, but really blossoming 74 with this band, the Eagles. None bigger, no one sold anywhere near the records in this genre that this band did. Of course, Poco close, sold a few, but look at the Hive. Of course, Poco and the Eagles are joined at the hip, and so are a few of the others. They all come from the Stone Canyon band, a bit Ricky Nelson, and that's somebody who'll be in the 50s crew if you wonder where he is now, because definitely very influential artist. He had a big lot to do with these people, and Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young should be included here too, really. It's all a transition into the Eagles, but the Eagles were the ones that really took it around the world in a bigger fashion, and of course brought us Hotel California. And Joe Walsh, of course, special mention there in a way, because he was the guitar player that sort of was the white man that could play like Hendrix. Then from people like Joe, who were a bit punkier than most, we ended up getting punk rock. And punk rock, Johnny Rotten doing his Hive, Transvestigation, continues stuff, definitely here with the Sex Pistols. Johnny's always playing with his breasts. It's a very weird bunch indeed. Supposed to be anti the Queen. Now their God Save the Queen thing is a fashion label and full Lizzie and William and Katie approved. We saw that in New Zealand. So no prizes there. Special mention, of course, you go to the Clash and the Jam and several other bands which came from this era, including our mate Boomtown Rats and Bob Geldof, and of course Bono from U2, were originally some sort of punkier Irish band, all influenced by the Sex Pistols and the new wave sort of idea in music, which led to that all that creepy stuff of the early 80s. But this band deserves a special mention in the top 10, and that's ABBA, because we've got the transgender on, no doubt at all. See the B's? B's are a female symbol, birth. A is much more masculine, and it's reversed here. So there's a clue straight away. Yeah, Benita in Bjorna, and Fred and Ago. I don't know what you call them in Swedish, but look how feminine that Bjorn looks on the left there. Yes, look at him on the left there too. That's a girl, isn't it? And so that the dresses make those two trannies look better. But see, even ABBA, I mean, that's going to hurt a few people, because lots of people were lusting over that blonde and even the other one. Definitely. And women thought the boys were pretty cute. No, look now, what you got egg on your face there, folks. Well, there is a major rundown of what I consider the major ones there for different reasons. With ABBA too, I guess you should include Fleetwood Mac. Those two sort of fit together in some odd way. Fleetwood Mac more earthy and rocky, of course, but the idea of the women singing, and they were in a similar era. I think ABBA was probably a bigger sales thing, but definitely Fleetwood Mac, some of these sold a lot of records too. Two very powerful forces, just like Beatles and Stones. They were repeats of some sort. See, they have a profiling thing. What we need now. Don't forget, ABBA won that Waterloo, or won the Eurovision Song Contest, I think in '74 with Waterloo. Waterloo. Now, that's a funny song, isn't it? And just shows you. And I've included them. I suppose the artist I'm missing here, when I think about it, is Jimi Hendrix and Bob Dylan. They're definitely the very important in this whole structure as well. They're the main crew of the 60s, I call them. And I guess Frank Zappa from the Laurel Canyon stuff, if you study any of that, you can see Frank Zappa's a pretty integral part. And of course, he ended up hanging around with John Lennon. They all in a lock with Lennon and McCartney, I've noticed. Even the Youngs from AC/DC, let alone Led Zeppelin and Sabbath. And I saw Ozzy Osbourne cry nearly when he met McCartney for the first time, apparently, in a number of years. And he was nearly crying. Oh, you influenced us so much. And I thought, there you go, Mr. Crowley, eh? Mr. Crowley, straight in your face. So yes, Jimi Hendrix, of course, and Janis Joplin goes without saying, and Bruce Springsteen and Bob Dylan. There are probably a few others, and no doubt people will say, oh, you didn't put this one in, that one in. I did mention Neil Young, as you know, there, and Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young certainly should be mentioned, and Donovan I should make special mention of. All of those are the main ones. So I don't think I've missed too many that I call the most influential of all those periods right up into the year 2000. And then we've got all this, Madonna certainly from the later 80s. And then that leads into all those people like Beyonce and Kylie Minogue and dozens of artists that emulate something what Madonna did. And the other, I suppose, impactful artist was Kate Bush, definitely with the presentation for females, and certainly wrapped up in the Tavistock thing. She's connected to Pink Floyd, and I guess they deserve a special mention. Just to show you how the monarchy is in bed with these people, here's the diva. Should be in a diva top list. Would be Barbra Streisand. And there he is. Nice chummy terms with old Barbara, because you really got me, Barbara, because Barbara's a bit of a boy and he's a bit of a girl, so, opposites attract. It's just a different way than what you thought about. And it's just funny that all these so-called heroes of ours just seem to be in on the bigger ball game. And they weren't letting us know, really. In a sly way, they were letting us know. I mean, the Lola song says it. We just thought it was just about the girl in the bar at Soho. We didn't think it came out of the bar, did we? But now we know.